Ultra Magnus. As car carrier, he can transport 4 Autobots into battle.
I'm just a soldier. I'm not worthy.
Amongst the powerhouse media franchises over the past number of decades, the Transformers is one of the collectible toy lines that introduced us to a wide range of offerings, spanning a seemingly limitless amount of characters. And very much at the forefront of this, in 1986 we had a character who was advertised as the Autobot City Commander, namely Ultra Magnus. Like some of the other Autobots and Decepticons, the origin of this character dates back a little earlier on in that same decade of the 1980s, back to the Japanese Diaclone toy line that preceded our famous cast of heroes and villains. And with how memorable Ultra Magnus is in the Generation 1 Transformers toy line, it's important to go back and have a look at where it all started. So let's talk about the history of Diaclone Powered Convoy. Let's begin. Western audiences will be familiar with Ultra Magnus from his American animated debut in the Transformers 1986 movie, released during the summer of that calendar year. During that run, he'd be voiced initially by famous actor Robert Stack for the film release and later have voice acting duties taken over by Jack Angel during the follow-up 3rd season of the Transformers cartoon. Temporarily, he'd bear the matrix of leadership after the death of Optimus Prime, and despite being what many would consider as a great soldier, Ultra Magnus certainly didn't have some of his fondest moments when he was thrust into the leadership role.
Open. Damn it, open! I can't deal with that now.
Certainly, Magnus felt more at home as a second-in-command, able to stand by as an advisor to Rodimus Prime or next to Optimus Prime after Prime's return at the end of the 3rd cartoon season. Now, in Japan, Ultra Magnus' start and finish in storyline canon was bookended by other appearances than the ones we've discussed here. In this market, he'd make his debut during the 1986 Scramble City one-shot OVA, just a few months prior to the American release of the Transformers movie. And his story would conclude in the Japanese-released 4th season titled Transformers: The Headmasters in 1987. Here, he'd be defeated and ultimately die during one-on-one combat against the Decepticon multi-changer Six-Shot, thus bringing a sad end to a beloved Autobot character. Now, part of the origin when it comes to Ultra Magnus is some of the design work done by Floro Derry, who helped on the 1980s animated cartoon. The design shown here was considered for Ultra Magnus, but would later be reworked into the aesthetic for the Orion Pax character during Season 2 of the cartoon. And of course, Orion Pax was the bot who, in storyline, would become Optimus Prime when writers decided to expand on Prime's backstory in the episode titled War Dawn. As a side note, I also want to mention that if you happen to be enjoying this video, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel, press that like button, and ring that notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future Toy Connections video content. Yes, it's a small effort for you, but it'll go a long way towards helping me with growing this channel. The Transformers in 1984 and 1985 had always utilized existing toy molds to license for their brand, most notably items from Takara's Diaclone as well as Microman toy lines. Ultimately, the decision was made to import one of the remaining unused Japanese products into US markets to become Ultra Magnus in 1986. And that would be the Diaclone Powered Convoy toy that had already been released in Japan as well as some European markets. The toy would show a smaller robot mode that could combine with its trailer to become the larger powered robot, which is a feature that, while we saw it in the Generation 1 toy, due to its origin from the Diaclone line, it didn't make it into any forms of Transformers storyline fiction, at least not initially. This color scheme has become popular in fan circles over the years, regardless of whether you display him in his robot mode or in his car-carrying truck mode. That said, the instructions would show other various transformation modes that you could configure this toy into, including a launch mode advertised along with the Diaclone jets that preceded the Seeker jet team in Transformers, which is something the Generation 1 toy line also later advertised, albeit this time launching with the aerial bot known as Silverbolt. The original toy itself has a bunch of items that were not offered with Ultra Magnus when it was recolored and imported for the 3rd wave of the Generation 1 toy line, In particular, there was this powered buggy, which is a smaller parts-forming robot, and a companion piece that came with Powered Convoy. And by parts forming, I mean that you'd need to disassemble it completely to switch it between its robot and car modes. There was also the Diaclone driver, which was a fixture across the Japanese Diaclone releases, but was notably absent in some Italian-released Diaclone toys when they were distributed by the company Jig back in the 1980s. Somehow though, Diaclone Powered Convoy is among those that did keep his driver when the figures were licensed for use in Italy. Do note that one possible configuration is to put the driver into the large robot's chest piece and mount the head onto it to form a vehicle of sorts. Also absent from G1 Ultra Magnus, but was part of this set, were some small wheels that you could attach underneath the smaller vehicle. That said, these wheels are very easy to lose due to their size. There's also the small circular wheel covers on the previously mentioned power buggy, and these are also easy to lose. The wheel covers for the buggy and the wheels that go beneath the chest piece came on a sprue like this when it was released with the original Diaclone toy. You may have noticed that the missiles on mine are of the more rounded bopper style that were used across many of the Italian Diaclone toys, and in this case you can see how different they look compared to the standard missiles for G1 Ultra Magnus. The missiles released in Japan by Takara were of a grey color, which is where the G1 Ultra Magnus ones were derived from. One key note is that in the run-up to the summer 1986 Transformers movie, some promotional footage was released that showed Ultra Magnus in his Diaclone colors before the change was made to what would become his classic color scheme. And while I realize that covers some backstory as to how the Ultra Magnus character was created in general, there's really quite a bit to discuss in the way of variants when it comes to Diaclone Powered Convoy. Compared to your standard Generation 1 release of Ultra Magnus, you might already consider the Diaclone Powered Convoy as a variant of sorts for the purpose of your own collection. That said, Powered Convoy has had many releases that differ from one another, ultimately creating a case of where you have variants within a variant, all of which are quite desirable amongst collectors. One highly valued version of Powered Convoy would be what's known as the Mekki version in Japan. This one has some chromed parts, a much lighter colored trailer component, and the shade of blue as well as the shade of red on its various parts are a little different from the more usual ones that we see from the standard Takara release or the Italian version that Jig released. The difference is much easier to see like this when you show them side by side. The missiles are also a much lighter color on the Mekki version, and while the box is almost identical to the usual Japanese release, there is some added Mekki text that you can see that I've circled here, which is just ever so slight in terms of being a variation to indicate that this is the box that's specific to this version. You can have a look on eBay here at what some sold listings go for, with the top listing being the more standard Powered Convoy and the second listing being a boxed version of the Mekki release. Both were missing a few pieces, but they are so rare that they still command high prices. And if that's still not enough, the story about the Mekki Powered Convoy still goes to a whole nother level. There's a very specific boxed set, known as the PCDX set, which contains a very specific gift set box and includes 3 items, namely the Mekki Powered Convoy, the Diaclone F1 in a red color that was a predecessor to 1984's Mirage character, and the Countach in a black color, which is a predecessor to 1984's Sideswipe. And this PCDX box set is very much the Grail of the Grails for many Diaclone collectors. Listings often go into the tens of thousands of dollars, and here's a sold listing from 2023 which included unused decals and the accessories still on their sprues with minty fresh figures. No, your eyes are not deceiving you, it really did go for 60 grand. Additionally, here's a Facebook sold listing of $750 American for just an unused decal sheet for the Mekki Powered Convoy. Both the seller and the buyer have actually contributed to some of the information in this video, so now's a good time to thank them, and just to also note that this really is a whole nother level to toy collecting. I mean, you start looking at pricing like this and it becomes a case of PCDX box sets on one side and Rolex watches on the other. It really is that crazy now when it comes to pricing. This is a level of collecting that I never imagined when I first got back into the hobby as an adult, and I can just barely comprehend this degree of value in our hobby even now. But the Powered Convoy color scheme really is that popular amongst collectors. People will go to great lengths to build significant collections of just Powered Convoy, and you can see here that this collection has a fleet worth of PCDX box sets, as well as several other Powered Convoy variants. And even after all that I've presented here, that's not even the end of the story. There's also the rare versions of Powered Convoy by the French company known as Joustra, with one of the box styles shown here. And of note, Joustra distributed Diaclone toys in the 80s to some European markets. Honestly, a conversation about Powered Convoy just goes on, and even boxes within the same market will have variations compared to one another, even if it's just a small change. For example, you can see an extra cutout in the bottom box where the wheels are in this photo, as opposed to no cutout for the wheels section on the top box. Also, there's differences in text like this on the Italian box, where the box with the extra text matches the red cab variant, and the one without the text was sold with the blue cab version. And on that same note, later versions of Powered Convoy, particularly in the Italian markets sold by Jeeg, were actually packed in with this red cab, akin to the colors of Optimus Prime. Some Italian releases, including the blue cab one in my collection, have an extra black colored rectangular piece at the bottom of the trailer, which you can see isn't on every version of Diaclone Powered Convoy, but it does make its way into the eventual G1 Ultra Magnus mold, but now colored in white. You can also see the helmet variations, as many have a hole in the center of the forehead while some do not. And the antennas on top can also vary between releases. As you can see, an extension on the tips of some versions at the top, whereas some have more of a flat top. Here's a comparison with the flat top antenna for G1 Ultra Magnus. Even the waist plate varies. The earliest style waist plate was like this, but later versions would be of this particular style, and you can see them side by side to see the differences more clearly, and it is the later style that would be recolored and then used for G1 Ultra Magnus. It's also worth mentioning that in 2001, Takara would release what would come to be known as the movie preview Ultra Magnus, based on the color scheme in the unused promotional reels mentioned earlier, which of course is akin to his Diaclone colors. In some ways, you can consider this a reissue of the Diaclone figure, but that said, it doesn't come with all the extra accessories of the Diaclone, like the powered buggy, the Diaclone driver, and other accessories. And it does come with an Autobot symbol to more readily fit in with your G1 Transformers. These movie preview Ultra Magnus figures also fetch very high prices. Ultimately, when I started this video, I didn't expect there to be this much information out there and didn't expect to do as much research as I ended up doing, but I feel that all of this is important to provide a mostly comprehensive story and history about Diaclone Powered Convoy. When it all comes down to it, the goal here was to show where Ultra Magnus as a character got started. I don't think anyone could have predicted that when Takara started the Diaclone toy line in 1980, with Powered Convoy hitting shelves a few years after, and with Diaclone discontinuing in 1985, that such a toy would have this great of a legacy. I mean, Ultra Magnus has done a lot over the decades. He was the main character in the Mystery of Convoy video game in 1986. He was featured in Marvel UK's run in the 1980s comic series, often fighting but also losing in combat to Galvatron. He'd be featured in the early 2000s Dreamwave Productions comics, where we'd see him first shed his outer armor to show his internal form of a white-colored Optimus Prime underneath. And he'd feature heavily in IDW Publishing's comics, where he'd have an internal form known as Minimus Ambus for a good chunk of that run. And of course, he'd be in the comic run by Skybound as well. And that's not even considering all the tie-ins and long-standing theories about his potential origin in the cartoon as an upgraded, reformatted version of Dion in the aforementioned War Dawn episode. And on top of all this are the subsequent appearances in other Transformers series where we'd see new versions of Ultra Magnus time and time again. Naturally, we can also keep exploring the rabbit hole of variants, from the unpainted faceplate version of his G1 toy, to versions that came with either plastic or rubber wheels, to other variations. This conversation will never end unless we put a stopping point to it. But we'd better put a pin in this, and hope that videos such as these can reach the goal of preserving an important aspect of toy history. If I accomplish nothing else, it was worth getting this information out there. And if you happen to like this video, don't go anywhere just yet. I'm gonna put another pre-Transformers discussion that you can click on right over here, or to have a look at my personal toy collection, you can have a look at this video right over here. And with that, let's transform and roll out into the next video. See you next time.